It's really, really important that you make reels and you make them really well.
Because what that's done is made advertisers work harder to get your attention.
The world that we live in now, people's attention spans are going down and down and down and down.
Hey, welcome back. So today we are talking about social media reels, shorts for your podcast, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to this one.
I'm sure you are, because you're very good at this. I watch your reels sometimes. I'm like, I want to be like him when I grow up. So I'm sure you're very excited.
I am. It's a fun topic, and I think everyone can relate, because everyone watches, the TikTok videos and they're swiping through, and everyone knows what reels are.
Yeah.
And utilising that to enhance your podcast and drive people to your podcast, to me, is like one of the most fun bits. Monetization episode was the most fun bit because everyone wants to make money. But to do that, you need to drive people there. And my little slogan that I always say to people is, treat your reels as the trailer to your movie.
Yes.
And people do take that on board when I say it like that, because no one just rocks up to a cinema to watch a film. You've seen the trailers, you've seen the short form content. So for me, we always treat it in the same way, and we try and make it as dynamic as possible. So yeah, let's get into it then. So
I think that's a really interesting point you said about no one rocks up to a movie without watching the trailer before. And there's some exceptions to that, right? Like if I love, say, Will Smith, and I know there's a new Bad Boys movie coming out, I'm probably going to go watch it because Will Smith is super famous. He's got a really loyal following, and people just go watch his movies. But most people starting a podcast aren't going to have that status.
But even you saying that, you would still have watched the trailer before you go to the cinema. It doesn't mean it's going to determine the fact that you're going to go or not.
Interesting.
If you're a diehard fan of Will Smith, you're going to turn up.
Yeah.
But regardless, you would have seen a trailer somewhere.
Yeah. They make trailers for every movie.
To understand that there's something being released in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll go and see Bad Boys. Definitely.
Just because it's Bad Boys, right?
Obviously.
But most people aren't going to have that kind of status. So it's really, really important that you make reels and you make them really well.
Yeah. And I think it's a bottleneck for a lot of people when we say make it really well.
Yeah. And
we'll obviously go into that in terms of utilising AI and editing techniques in this episode. What stands out to you when you watch a reel? What is it you're looking for? Or do you not really think about it? You just kind of like a reel or don't like a reel?
That's a really interesting question. I think that style is one of them. So like visual appeal. So like, does it look visually good? Does it catch my eye when I'm scrolling through? I think the hook is also really, really important. So in the first 5 seconds, is there something that attracts my attention that I'm like, oh, what's that? Piques my curiosity that I want to go through. Yeah. And then I think also content for me is really, really important. So is there substance? Like some reels I watch just because they're stupid, right? But when I'm thinking about podcasts, I'm thinking of, I want value from a podcast, or I want to learn something, or I want to grow, or I want to be better, or I want to be entertained. So the substance of the trailer is really, really important, or the reel is really
you're
important.
investing a huge amount of time in watching that podcast. Most podcasts are 35, 40 minutes. Some go to an hour and a quarter. You're going into a territory of, I could go and watch Bad Boys at the cinema, or I could watch a podcast. It better be worth it.
Yeah.
So, it is your personal time you're investing. People work hard. They don't have a huge amount of spare time. So, for me, it's I would agree with all of those. I think the visual appeal when it first pops up, because there's so many things popping up at you on your screen, whether you're scrolling TikTok, Instagram, whatever, that it needs to stand out.
Yeah.
The sound needs to be good. It needs to have captions. It needs to be dynamic.
Captions, yes.
Why do people not put captions on their reels?
It makes no sense.
It's like, just don't bother doing it at all. No one's listening to your reels, are they?
No.
Maybe 1% are the exception.
Well, the thing is, people now have to put your sound on, because most people are scrolling Instagram, TikTok, whatever on the tube, right? So they're just watching it, but no sound. So the captions, honestly, it sounds so basic, but it's so important.
But when do most people watch it? They're not watching it during working hours. They're watching it in bed. They're watching it whilst on the toilet. They're watching it on the tube in the commute. So if you don't have captions, I don't know what the context that entire reel is. You've completely lost me. So it's such a basic element of editing that it's an essential one, isn't it? We've got tons we're going to go through in this episode, and we're going to loop around into captions again later. But for me, 100% the visual appeal and the captions are important. The context to the reel is important. So whether it's a subject I'm really interested in and they've got a really cool guest, that will hook me.
Yeah.
But without me even knowing that, you need to have a good hook in the first place. Because again, otherwise it's so easy just to scroll to the next thing.
And when we talk about hooks, that's like, for me, it's the first 5 seconds, but it might be even shorter than that,
Probably
right?
3 seconds.
Yeah, then that's really like what happens in your opening section of your video. How are you hooking in people to want to watch the rest of the video? And I think sometimes naturally we're not very intentional about that. but we have to be really, really intentional about what is my first 3 seconds of my clip. Do I have someone rambling on a question for the first 3 seconds? You've probably lost people. Or do you have a really intriguing answer to a question that makes people wonder, okay, where did that come from? What's happening? So the hook is something where you need to be really intentional about and really think about before we just blast out videos. And I think this is one of the downfalls sometimes with AI, is that if you don't check the product from the AI tool, it might take something totally out of context, not actually put the right hook at the beginning. You still have to know what you're doing to get good stuff out of it.
100%. AI is brilliant at churning out content for you. You still need to train it to do it properly, and you still need to go in and refine it. You have to treat every single reel as a trailer to your movie. They don't just pump out tons and tons of trailers for a film, do they?
No, they might have 2 or 3 maybe.
Even if you've got 5, it's very intentional in terms of what those trailers are meant to do.
Yeah.
So they need to grab you in the first 3-4 seconds. They need to keep you hooked for 10-15 seconds. The call to action is to go to the cinema to watch the thing. So you have to treat the reel as a marketing technique, and you have to put some time and effort and thought into it.
Question, you mentioned about, how long the trailer is. Roughly how long do you make the reels for when you're doing a podcast? What do you think it should be?
Good question. It's going to vary depending on the subject, the context, the podcast itself.
And your platform, to be fair.
And your platform. Yeah. I mean, maximum 59 seconds regardless.
Yeah.
If you're going to put YouTube Shorts, it has to be 59 seconds. So you're already bound by that. We try and keep to 15 to 35 seconds for probably 90% of the podcasts that we run reels for. Because if you can't hook someone and have a call to action to listen to your podcast in 30 seconds, it probably isn't that interesting, that snippet, that soundbite. Some of our Podfather ones go on for 45, 50 seconds because there's value and education in those ones.
That's interesting.
And that's why I say it's to do with the context. So the reels you're picking out generally are going to be either entertaining, of value, or quite prophetic.
What do you mean by prophetic?
Prophetic and profound.
Okay.
So you're going to learn something and go, I need to know more about this. So you haven't actually provided value in that, but it's something that you need to dig deeper into, hence going into the podcast. So if you can hit the, what I call valuetainment in everything that we do.
Love that.
So it's the value and the entertainment. Yeah. It's all well and good providing loads of value, but if it's not entertaining, people aren't going to be interested. And if it's really entertaining, but there's no value, it's like watching all the cat videos on TikTok. It's like after a while, you get a little bit bored of that.
Yeah.
So aim for valuetainment in the podcast and also ideally in the reels as well. I think 30 seconds. If you can start with that 30 second as a guideline, most of the time that'll work.
And I think it's really important to understand the psychology of why the 30 seconds, because I think the world that we live in now, people's attention spans are going down and down and down and down. And I noticed that in myself as well. Like if something's not interesting in like 15, 20 seconds, I'm on to the next thing. So I think that 30-second thing is like, it's quite a small commitment from someone to ask of them of like a 30-second video and just see like what's going on. So I think it's really important to understand why do we need to start adapting and adjusting to those things that are happening culturally.
But I can only see that attention span shortening over time because all the marketing messages we used to get, we used to think that was a lot in terms of magazines and billboards and TV. And now you've got internet and social media. So you're literally surrounded by it. So for me to invest time in watching a video, it better be worth my time.
Yeah.
So even 30 seconds to me, it's quite a bit of time unless I'm getting something from it. And the good thing with hooking someone in 30 seconds is they go, well, you've provided value and entertainment as an example. I want to see what else you've got. What other reels have you got? And suddenly they're doing the sort of the binge watching on the reels and they're going into your channel and watching everything that you've got. And that's why I say you can't afford to have any weak links in your reels, because if you've got 3 or 4 in a row that they're watching, you've made all that effort in hooking them in the first time, and then after a while they're like, oh, actually these are all gone to crap.
Yeah.
So I won't bother with your channel.
I think it's so interesting because I come from a TV background, right? And in TV you had, a 10-second slot, 30-second slot, 60-second, some like longer, but those are quite rare. Those are more for like infomercials. And before, people couldn't skip ads, right? So people had to watch the 30 seconds of the ad. They can change channels and stuff like that, but all the ads are on at the same time, right? So you're just flicking ad channels. And people are kind of used to that, okay, 30-second ad, da-da-da-da-da. But now people can just skip ads, even on like YouTube and different things like that. They can skip through those. And that's absolutely what they'll do with your content if it's not good.
And I love the fact that those platforms have made that happen, because what that's done is made advertisers work harder to get your attention.
Yeah.
There's none of this lazy advertising. You post something, you're like, oh, well, if I'm stuck watching Coronation Street, I'll just have to watch the 30-second ad they've posted. It's like, well, if it's no good, they can still skip. So work harder and use sales psychology, use marketing techniques to make sure you do hook those people. And I think for me, reels it's literally the most important thing in a podcast. In the entire process, you can have the most amazing podcast. If you don't treat the sales psychology and the marketing techniques to build those reels, no one is watching that.
So true. It's so true. And even like what we do with Podfathers, we spend much more time working out the reels than we do the episodes and all that kind of stuff, because the reels are the bait. That's really what's going to get people in to watch the whole episode.
I mean, for context, what you've just said. So for us to edit an entire episode of Podfathers, you're talking 3 to 4 hours with all the graphics and everything else. We still make it look pretty cool. And to shoot it, what takes us one take, 45 minutes or so, to get 10 reels off of that episode. And we don't really use AI as much as we probably should. We like control of everything. Yeah. We like putting all the dynamic elements and building that brand theme off of it. To create 10 reels for an episode probably takes close to 10 hours.
Wow.
So twice as much to create 10 reels as it does to put together an entire show. And we could use AI and we could knock it out in half an hour. The problem is,
it's not the same.
If it's not having the same impact of driving people to the podcast, what's the point in doing it? And then if we need to delve into the AI and make sure we've got the hook at the start and we've got all the dynamic elements,
might as well have done it to begin with.
And
I meant what I said at the beginning, like your reels from Cheeky Monkeys come up on my feed all the time and I always watch them because they're fun. Yeah. I really enjoy your reels, so it's worth the time.
Yeah, and obviously for us, it's, again, trying to make it fun, but also provide value if we can in terms of what the guests are talking about. And who would you say is the best at creating reels at the moment? Who's the big name? I've got an obvious one that pops up.
Yeah.
You know who that is.
Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah. Have you got a different answer to that?
Do you know what? I don't see that many other really good reels. He has someone, so when I was at the podcast show, they had his head of trailers as a guest, and he's like a cinematic genius, and he's like, that's his sole job, is to create those trailers that hook people, and he does a great job.
Yeah, and I've got no other examples. That's what I was going to Steve.
Yeah,
it's an obvious choice. You watch any of his trailers, his reels, it just captivates you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to get people to understand, is you have to treat it like that, because there are so many podcasts out there that you need to make sure you can stand out, and that's the one easy way to stand out. So what else have we got?
I think that one of the other really good things about reels is that they can create conversation. So if you put out a decent reel, it's not just so that people can like thumbs up it. You want people to be having conversation in the comments. And that's something that is increasing in this like culture that we live in, is that back and forth in the comments. And I think a really good reel will create conversation.
That's almost a fourth C, because we use a 3 C's, don't we?
Yeah.
What are the 3 C's?
3 C's are clickbait, controversy, cliffhangers, and let's add conversation. Yeah. So I think that the 3 C's is something that we want people to be thinking about when they're creating their reels. And this really comes down to the culture of your podcast and the dynamic that you have with your podcast. So for example, one of my podcasts is emotional intelligence in leadership. So with that one, I don't really go too clickbaity, because the kind of person that I want to engage isn't really someone that I want to get in with clickbait, you know? I go more for maybe a cliffhanger with that one. So maybe you explain the 4 C's that now we've added in.
Excuse me. Oh.
You all right?
Yeah, something's stuck in my throat then. We'll cut that out. So the 4 C's, this comes down to, again, creating reels with intention. You want people to do something rather than watching and go, all right, cool. The cliffhanger is telling a story to a point where you're not revealing the answer at the end. So you have to watch the full episode to get that answer. Controversies, very topical, depends on the subject, the niche you're in, whether it's going to work or not. But having someone with a controversial idea, just for the purpose of having others watching going, I totally disagree to this, whether they're trolls or not, people have got differing opinions, but having it so controversial that it does spark a debate. And that's not a negative. Every time we say that, people are like, oh, I'm going to get blasted on my comments. Great.
Cool. Yeah.
People are engaging in your idea, in your content, which means the platforms are looking at it going, well, this is doing well. People are engaging. They don't know. There's no differentiation between negative and positive. No. Just that people are engaging. People are seeing it. And by them posting, it's also showing on their reels that they post on such and such reel. So already the algorithms are picking up your reel as important. So don't be afraid of controversy. And then the other one is clickbait, which I'm not a fan of.
Why not? And what is clickbait?
Clickbait is very tabloidy, and I don't like tabloid. So it's essentially rehashing a conversation you've had, and it's out of context within the podcast itself. So people are watching, and it just doesn't quite make sense. And it's a controversial topic, which within the context of the podcast wasn't meant like that. Does that make sense?
Give an example.
Piers Morgan.
Perfect.
He is just clickbait all over. He is tabloid and clickbait.
Yeah.
So it's getting people to click, and it's got an over-dramatized headline or a title.
Yes.
And within the context of the show itself, it actually isn't that dramatized. But they've dramatized it for the sake of getting you to click. You know, this person earned £1 million in a day. And it's like, well, how? And then in the actual show itself, it wasn't in a day. It wasn't £1 million. So it's a driver to get people to watch for the sake of watching. And the problem is it may work one or two times, but once you've lost people's trust in that process, again, like I say, Piers Morgan, you just lose trust and credibility all over. You don't trust anything they put out.
I think it's important to remember that we're talking about really podcasts for a business.
Exactly.
So you don't want to be doing things where people feel like, well, I clicked, I didn't really get what I was meant to get. And that loss of trust for a business is going to kill you. And
if you feel duped for the sake of getting a click, you're not going to trust them again for anything they put out. Or it's going to take a long time to gain their trust again to go, okay, well, I'll give them a go. So yeah, for me, clickbait doesn't work for business. I might be wrong. People might disagree with that. Great, debate it in the comments. Help the algorithms. But for me, it's just not a good tact to use, but it does work for some people.
It depends on your business. That's the thing. It really depends on you. If you're a newspaper, like, okay, clickbait might work, you know, but if you're someone who's providing a service, you need to have integrity and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really work. You know, so you really have to understand your business, your customers, and see what is it that they really want from the content that I'm giving them. Yeah,
I think just the nature of clickbait, though, for a business, the whole point of clickbait is meant to bait you into clicking. So I think using other tactics what would be interesting is getting people to comment some clickbait links or reels that they've seen that hook them, but they've also gained value out of it. Because I'm not sure we're going to get very comments.
That's not good for engagement.
No, and I think cliffhangers, they always work. Right. Stephen Bartlett does a great job. You know, he gets to a topic and they're explaining something as a guest going, we found the secret too.
Yeah.
Done. Watch the full episode. So they're great. And also, if you can just provide value in your reels, people go, okay, I want to find out more. Because clearly you are about education, you are about providing value.
And once you've got your reels, what do you think people should do with them? So what are the main platforms that you use for your reels?
I think use as many platforms as you can, because the whole point of a reel is also to increase your brand awareness. So as a business, if you can be seen on every single platform that you're posting every day, even if it's one reel a day, that's not difficult to do from a 45-minute show. So posting on Twitter doesn't cost you anything. Posting on TikTok doesn't cost you anything. Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, they're the main ones that we stick to, and obviously LinkedIn as well, especially for businesses. I know there's others, people use Snapchat. I'm not sure for a business that's as relevant.
I feel too old to be using Snapchat, to be honest.
I've never used it in my life. But if you're a business owner under 17 and you want to use Snapchat to post your reels, go ahead. And there may be other platforms that people want to chip in and comment and do that. But for us, YouTube Shorts is probably the best performing, because what you can do from that is link it directly to the episode. So as you watch it, click here, it takes you directly to the full episode. So that's an instant driver. Instagram's great because it's brand visibility as well. And then you can have a link in your bio to take them straight to there, but it's a bit more faffy.
So there's something that I came across recently. It's called Manychat. And what you can do is, where people say, comment whatever, cheeky monkey, and we'll send you the link. So that's what people are doing now for podcasts. So they're saying, comment episode 1 and I'll send you the link to this episode. And it's automation. So basically, once that happens, it will then send them the link in their inbox. And what that means is that you're not disrupting the flow of, okay, now I've got to go to the link in the bio, then I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. You're opening a conversation directly with that person. And you also know people who are now interested in your podcast. Because sometimes the numbers can just be numbers, like you don't know who those people are. But when this person has said, okay, send me the link to that, you can also have follow-up conversations with them. So something like Manychat, and there's lots of different automation tools like that. But that's something that's really good for podcasters, because you can get people to engage with it that way. They've also left a comment, which means that your engagement goes up. You know, so that's a really, really good way to get more.
That's interesting. Manychat's on our list to look into.
Okay.
And I'm going to look into it even quicker.
Quicker now.
Because like I say, the whole point of commenting, yes, you get the link directly in your DMs, but it's more about the algorithm, and also your friends seeing that you've commented on this post, and there's a bit of FOMO maybe. Well, hang on, just send me the link as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's actually really, really good. And some of the other stuff you can do as well is they can say, oh, we'd also happily email you the link or email you when a new podcast up. What's your name? And then it will take your name and it will literally go back and forth in just a chat, but it's AI.
And suddenly you've built almost like an email list.
Exactly.
And this goes on to one of the other points in terms of building a community around your podcast. So rather than always looking for new people, you are catering to the people who are already following you and making sure you're engaging with them and getting them involved and interacting with them. So whether it's getting DMs or getting... One thing that works really well on some of the podcasts we've got here is people sending in their stories.
Love that.
So again, depending on what niche you're in, whether it's recruitment or dental, or there's always going to be a story people can submit to say, this is the experience I've had. And then you can read it out and suddenly you've got them engaged. And because you've sent that story, guess what? You're going to listen to every episode just in case your story comes up.
Yeah.
So that's another good way of building that community. And yeah, obviously, like I say, I'm going to look into Manychat a bit sooner than I was going to, because that sounds like a great idea, especially if you can automate that process as well. Yeah.
And it just gives people that instant access, which is what people want. You know, they want it served to them really easily, and Manychat will do that.
Fine, okay. And yeah, obviously, one of the other benefits of Reels is the fact that you are engaging new audiences very, very easily. And we've done it before where we've had a very good Reel and we've run a sponsored ad on that, which not many people do.
What do you mean by that?
So, for example, on Instagram, you can run a sponsored ad. You can boost the post. So we'll take a reel that we really like and we'll run it as an advert to everyone within that industry because we think it hits the value point and the entertainment point within a short duration. So
I think that's a really, really interesting thing to do because you've already kind of tested it. You've seen that it's naturally done well and now you're just amplifying that. I love that.
Yeah, because it doesn't cost a huge amount to then run a sponsored post on it. Let's say you're a beauty business, so you've got a local demographic. Well, if we run that ad within a 15-mile radius of your beauty shop as a reel, it's not really an advert, so people are already off guard. And they've got the guard down. Whereas if it looks like a blatant advert, it's a lot easier to skip. Whereas if it's just another reel, and we've targeted people who are interested in that beauty service within a 15-mile radius and they're watching in, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know you could do that beauty treatment in that way.
And I think you can also do something similar on LinkedIn as well. So if you have a post that's doing really well, and I think companies can do it with their employees' posts, for example. So like whatever company I work for, if I've done a post that's done really well, they can actually boost my post and it'll go out to more people and it's just a post. You know, it's a post that's got engagement and different things like that. I think that's a really, really important thing to think about with your reels.
Yeah, and just testing it is important, but why not utilize a little bit of ad spend? If you know it's doing well anyway, get it seen by more people within your demographic. So, for example, with Podfathers, we could if we've got a really good reel, we could target business owners or content creators in the UK to watch that particular reel. And suddenly we've got more people that we are hitting rather than assuming organically they're going to find us somehow.
And I think that that's also a bit of a shift that we're seeing now is that organic content has to be better and better for it to reach more people. They want us to be spending on ads and things like that. So it is something that everybody should be considering as well, even as you're building out your podcast is, okay, at some point, let me test out some ads and see how that works for it.
Yeah, and as a business, that's part of your marketing spend anyway. So if you're spending time and money creating your podcast, you want to be promoting it. So rather than promoting the full episode, which to be honest, most people aren't going to go straight to, utilizing those reels, running ads on those reels to get it to your target demographic and building that community out that way. It's leapfrogging what you're already doing.
Yeah, agreed. And I think something that I think is really important to think about when we're thinking about Reels is actually LinkedIn. I think that for a business podcast, you have to be on LinkedIn. It's not something you can or you should really avoid because that's where most of your customers are actually going to be is on LinkedIn. So I think it's really, really important to get your LinkedIn like profile and your LinkedIn posts right. And that was one of the things I did with my podcast at the beginning was every week, and those were actually longer ones. I would put like a 1 to 2 minute reel for LinkedIn, and I wouldn't actually make it vertical. I made it more horizontal because that's a bit better for LinkedIn, but it just really depends. And that's like those people are a bit more engaged. They want to get the value from it. That's more value than entertainment, to be honest, on LinkedIn. But you're demonstrating the value of your business in doing that. And people will reach out to you on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw your reel and this, and this. So I think LinkedIn is a really, really important one to consider when you're doing a business podcast.
I mean, if it's business to business, that's probably the first place I'd start.
Yeah.
And then work backwards to everything else because it doesn't cost you anything else to be on Instagram, Facebook.
Love that.
But B2C, I'd kind of go the other way around.
Interesting.
Because again, if you're, again, a beauty salon, as an example, being on LinkedIn isn't of huge value to you.
Do you think?
Let's debate.
Because I think that there are some things that I see on LinkedIn that I buy as a consumer. But you know that LinkedIn people are professional. They might have more money. So I often see more expensive stuff on LinkedIn than necessarily like a lipstick or whatever it is. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think you are expecting that kind of content on Instagram. So, for example, a beauty treatment, it's business to consumer. It's a lot easier and cheaper to target if you're going to spend on ads on Instagram Meta than it is on LinkedIn.
Is it?
Yeah, okay. a lot. I'm talking like a sixth of the price for the same demographic and the same audience you're going to be targeting with the exact same reel.
Interesting.
LinkedIn in general costs more to run ads.
But that's because I think people on LinkedIn are probably more responsive, or they might be better customers than necessarily people on, say, an Instagram. So on Instagram, you've got like 12-year-olds and, you know, like there's kids on there.
Yeah, but if you're targeting, you're going to be targeting between 25 and 35. You're going to target people within a 15-mile radius. So you can still be very targeted with who you go after. But all of this is down to testing as well.
Yeah.
Like regardless of what we say, run an ad on LinkedIn, run it on Instagram with your reels and see who responds best. That's just marketing 101, is you should be split testing everything.
Yeah. I feel like with LinkedIn, you can do better with organic content. It goes to better people. And I just feel like people on LinkedIn are more ready to take action, but you might be right. It might be more business to business or business to like business consumer, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That's also slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're selling apparel, branded clothing, things like that, I'm not sure LinkedIn's going to be, whereas Instagram is very visual. You're targeting that sort of client. So again, it is a case of you'd still post on LinkedIn because it costs you nothing. But in terms of thinking about logically where you're going to spend your ad money, it's thinking about where your audience is most likely to see it and take action. So very dependent on the podcast as to what approach, but just test everything.
Agreed.
In fact, one thing I haven't got on my notes, I've just thought about, when you post reels, I know you post a lot of reels as well, is there a time of the day or days of the week that you think perform better?
If it's a reel that's leading someone to a podcast. So before, I used to release my podcast on a Friday because I thought, okay, people can be ready for the weekend and blah, 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 blah. And then I think one day I was running late for one of them, so I did it on a Monday. And I got more views because it was on the Monday. Because actually people are like, okay, well, I've got my commute on this day and I can do this. And I thought, okay, but it's the weekend. But they're like, my weekend's already planned. Yeah. Especially as you get older, your weekends are planned like 10 in advance. Yeah. So I found that actually Mondays for releasing the podcast was slightly better for me than the Friday. And it just depends on your niche, your industry. But what have you seen?
The podcast release is slightly different to the reels. So the podcast release, I actually would never have posted on a Friday. Because I know my Fridays personally get very busy. Yeah. And again, depends on your age group. If you're targeting people who are 18 to 30, when people still go out on a Friday evening, they're not going to be sitting home going, I'm going to watch that podcast tonight rather than going out.
Definitely not.
But, you know, our age group, mid-30s, let's say, you know, you want to be going out for a meal with your partner and things like that. So Friday nights are generally kind of off limits for me in terms of dedicating my time to anything else. Like I say, weekends are completely full, whether it's with kids' parties or this event or that event, that's kind of off limits. So for us, Monday to Thursday works great. We've not seen any difference in terms of when we split tested.
Really?
We've taken the exact same podcast released on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, morning and evening, split tested the hell out of it. And literally we've got the same numbers across the board.
Wow.
Within like 5% of each other. So for a podcast release, I don't think it matters. I think Fridays to Sundays, for me, what we've seen is we keep off limits in terms of releasing that. In terms of posting reels, it's an interesting one. It also depends on the platform. Yeah. So LinkedIn, people are checking it 9 to 5, 9 to 6 generally. If you post in the evenings, we get very little interaction. Really? Because I don't personally check LinkedIn in the evenings. I check it during the day. It's a weird psychology thing. Yeah. Whereas in the evenings, because I want to be, I've worked hard and I kind of want to be dumbing down a little bit. Yeah. I'm back onto Instagram. Or I'm onto TikTok because I kind of don't want to use my brain as much as I have during the day. So I switch off a little bit.
Yeah. I think it depends on your content and depends on your market as well. So for example, some people have like a big American following, and that makes a massive difference.
With
so
the time zones.
Time zone. So 3:00 in the afternoon, our time is a decent time-ish because the Americans are waking up. English people are like mid-afternoon, so like it just depends on your audience too. I actually had way better success, I think, posting at like 8 p.m. Okay. Yeah, but that might just be that my audience makeup of people are still on their computer at 8 p.m.
But is it different for each platform that you've posted on?
Absolutely. So that's LinkedIn.
Fine.
So LinkedIn was probably my most like used platform, right? And that's where like 8 p.m, 9 p.m. was like actually my sweet spot, where I'd get the most engagement, the most comments, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. It depends on who you're targeting. But also like data people often are like coding till quite late, for example, or like leaders are working quite late. They log back in after the kids have gone back to bed.
Burning the midnight candle.
Exactly. So it just depends, you know?
Fine, okay. Yeah, I think this is the importance, and we're trying to impart that on you, is it's not a case of there is one rule straight away. We can't give you guidance of going, if you've got this podcast, great, release it on this date, this time. You have to test it because we don't know where your audiences are. Who your demographic is. So it's really, really important. I mean, in some of the masterclass, I know we go into a lot of that where we analyze who their ideal demographic is, and then we try and build out logic based on data as to what we think would work best. So we kind of counteract some of the problems they would have testing it themselves. But we've tested, I know we took an ad about 4 weeks ago, and one of the reels we had, we posted it on a Monday at 9 a.m. The following week was Monday at midday, and one was at Monday 8 p.m. Exactly the same reel, same everything. And the one at 8 p.m. was about 10 times as many views, a lot more engagement. So people weren't interacting Monday morning or Monday afternoon. Yet in the evening, they've kind of got home and gone, I just want some light entertainment. So that was work for us. But then on LinkedIn, that same post has done better at 1 p.m.-ish on a Monday. People are on their lunch checking their LinkedIn posts. So for me, testing is a huge thing. So you might have the best reel in the world. If you post it at the wrong time or the wrong day because you've not thought about what your audience would be doing during that time, then you could end up losing a lot of potential as well. So.
And I would just say, like, don't let that stop you from doing stuff. Do it anyway. Like, it's still better to have it out there than to not, because you're waiting for the perfect time.
But you don't know what the perfect time until you test it.
So you do it.
So you have to be posting. I mean, we're still learning in terms of what our audiences are interacting with. So for us, it's posting on different days, different times. But from a marketing point of view, for us, it's about looking at that data and making sure we're bearing it in mind for next time we post. So you constantly should be learning off the podcast you're doing and the reels that you're posting as well.
Do you reuse reels ever?
Yeah, all the time. Again, depends if it's very topical for that week because something's happened. It's irrelevant to use it 6 weeks later. But if it's a generic reel that is still adding value, it's still a bit entertaining, we could use that every 3 weeks if we wanted to.
So I think that's one of the things that people are kind of hesitant about. It's like, well, my audience has already seen it. But I think sometimes we forget that, like, not 100% of your audience sees it the first time anyway. Instagram, for example, might show it to 20 to 30% on a good day of your followers. So actually, like, they might not have even seen it before. And now I'm seeing way more old posts and stuff like that. So Instagram doesn't even care. Instagram is surfacing your stuff 6 weeks later, 10 weeks later. So I don't think we should be afraid of doing that.
But this is the same psychology in general marketing. So for example, when you do cold email outreach, you send one email, you don't get a response. You don't go, or you shouldn't go, well, they're not interested. No, they could be on maternity leave. They could be away that day. They could be ill that day. Anything could have happened, or they just had 50 emails and they're trying to blast through them as quickly as possible. So you'd always follow up with an email, or you'd send a letter or phone them if you're really interested in working with that client. So this is the same. So yeah, like I say, 20% of your demographic may have seen it, but you've got new clients since then, since 2 weeks ago, or new prospects. So they should be seeing it. And if they don't want to watch the rest of it, they'll just skip to the next one anyway. It doesn't matter. If you're posting it every single day, I mean, don't.
There was one woman who, like, she would basically post the same stuff every day, but she'd, like, delete the old one and then just post it again. And, like, it actually worked for her. So it's like, it doesn't work sometimes the way that we think. It's important that you test this stuff out.
Absolutely. And reels are a good test bed because they don't cost you a huge amount of money once they're done anyway. They're sitting there. Don't just use it once. Use it across every single platform you can think of. Repurpose it and use it every 3 weeks and just change the times and see what people are reacting to. So it's just great content to keep using. Okay, so we touched on this earlier as well in terms of editing reels. And it's a huge bottleneck for a lot of people because as soon as we say that, they're like, well, I don't have editing software. You do, don't you? You just go into the App Store. You've got editing software right there. And most of the time it's free if you want it. From your point of view, what do you use out of interest?
So when I do studio episodes, like online studio episodes, I actually use Riverside to do my edits. So I edit it all within there. Yeah. I'm quite a lazy editor, to be honest. So I use Riverside. Or if I can't use Riverside, then I use DaVinci. And then I use Opus for the clips normally. Yeah,
Opus is a good one. We have used that quite a bit, at least just to give us ideas. It takes quite a bit of refining though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So for us, I prefer using Premiere.
Okay.
Not everyone's got access to Adobe Suite, but for us, it's about having the full control over every single element we're going to have in there with the zooms, with all the other graphics we can build in from our library, the music and the captions. And DaVinci is the other obvious one. CapCut's a good one.
Yeah, that's very like mobile friendly.
Yeah. Never use it to actually, because you almost need to cut the reel in the first place you can't just import the entire podcast and start chopping, I don't think.
You can, but it's quite clunky.
Right.
It is quite clunky to do it like that. So I would definitely start with the bit that you have in mind already.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something probably worth thinking about with editing as well is that platforms often reward you for using their in-app stuff. So when you do an Instagram reel, if you add the music in Instagram and you add they generally reward you a little bit with more reach or whatever because you're using their features. Same with YouTube, like you can do the remixes and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely worth, if you can figure it out into your flow, testing using some of the in-app features as well.
It's interesting. We have tried that, and we used to treat it like a point system. So if you use the native elements within there, we thought you get a point for every single one, so it would just bump you up. For us, though, it's actually not made any difference in terms of numbers.
Reels are very good.
Our reels are very good.
Reels are very good.
We do spend a lot of time making
honestly. So I think that, if you're at that level, absolutely. Yeah. I think if you're starting out, then it does give you some of those little bumps.
Yeah, and there's definitely pros and cons, because people doing it natively, the problem is if there's 5 or 6 different platforms that you're then doing it natively, that's very time consuming. Whereas actually having full control over everything, it's time consuming, but then you post and distribute the same thing across 6 platforms. So again, this is something you want to be able to test as well, whether you want the full control, or the other option that people don't think about is you can just outsource the whole thing. You can go to an editing company, a video company, and say, that's my podcast. Can you just create some reels off it?
True.
And they have the assets. They have everything they need to do that for you. So sometimes it's not as expensive as you might think, because they're already geared up for catering for things like that. I mean, we get tons of people sending us their content and going, can you cut it into reels? We can, and we do a fairly good job. Obviously, it's determined by what they've shot in the first place. But we can always make it. You can't polish a turd. You can. In most of the cases, we won't take on a project that we don't think we can have an impact on, though. So we'll just be honest and say what you shot we can't do anything with it. And that most editing companies that you'll go to will generally be very honest with that, rather than taking it on for the sake of it. So if you can outsource, especially at the start, if you've got the budgets to do that within your podcast, create your podcast, hand it over to a specialist company who know what they're doing, and let them cut your reels. Don't try and do everything yourself if
you don't have to.
Because it's still time consuming. If you take into account how much that's going to cost you with the learning curve, getting the software, taking the time to edit, sometimes it's better just to pay someone. And they know what they're doing. And it probably weighs out the same sort of price in the end.
It will also lessen your learning curve when you see how someone does it professionally.
Yeah, exactly that. And you can also churn out more reels quicker. So if you've got a podcast, rather than sitting on it for 6 weeks because you're trying to learn how to cut reels,
get it out.
You can get it out within 3 days because your editing company have done it for you, and suddenly you've got 20 reels out there, you've got your full podcast, and it makes the whole podcasting journey a lot less seamless. A lot more seamless, a lot less frictionless. I got myself confused. It's a lot more seamless. It removes friction. It removes friction, yes.
Less words is always better.
Absolutely. So, so I think a lot of people should outsource, and we see it a lot where people do their podcast here in the studio, for example. They take their podcast away because they want to cut their own reels. After about a week, they come back to us going, can we just pay you to cut the reels? Because, especially business podcasts, you're running a business. You haven't got time to be adding another thing to your workload. So sometimes it's better just to outsource.
Agreed.
So in summary, reels are essential. Captions on reels are 100%. That's not even up for discussion. No. It's essential. And make them as engaging and dynamic as you can. Keep them under 59 seconds. 30 seconds typically is better. Anything else you want to add to this episode?
No, go have fun making some reels.
Yeah, actually just enjoy the process if you're going to be doing reels. Watch
some cheeky monkey video reels because they are fun. The one that I loved probably the most is where you throw money in the air.
Oh, that was the podcast monetization one, actually. Yeah.
Loved that. So
brilliant. Thank you for tuning in. Follow, like, share, subscribe, comment in the DMs, comment in the post. Send us any DMs with any questions you have, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you next time.